Black firefighter and rescue dog save trapped koalas. The roar of the fire was deafening. Marcus couldn't see more than 3 feet ahead through the thick, choking smoke that turned the afternoon into an apocalyptic nightmare. His protective gear was smeared with ash and soot, the reflective strips barely visible in the hellish orange glow that surrounded them. "Bella, find them, girl." Marcus shouted to the black and white border collie who darted ahead, her specialized protective suit making her look like a small astronaut exploring a burning planet. The dog stopped, barked twice, and pawed at the base of a towering eucalyptus that was moments away from being engulfed. Marcus's radio crackled. "Johnson, get out now. The wind's shifted. You've got less than 5 minutes before you're cut off." Sweat poured down his face inside his mask as he spotted what Bella had found, a mother koala clutching a tiny joey, frozen with terror 20 feet up. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw the same primal fear he'd recognized in countless human victims over his 15 years as a firefighter. "Not leaving them," Marcus growled into his radio. "Found survivors." "Negative, Johnson. That's a direct order. The fire break didn't hold. It's coming too fast." Just then, a massive branch crashed down mere feet away, sending up a fountain of embers that swirled around them like fiery snowflakes. Bella yelped, backing away from the intense heat. Marcus looked up at the koalas, then at the approaching wall of flame that painted the smoke blood-red. He had seconds to decide. "God help me," he whispered, unstrapping his emergency harness. "But let's go back to how this all started." It was just 3 hours earlier when Marcus Johnson had been enjoying his first cup of coffee on his day off. Marcus sat on the small porch of his rented cottage, watching the sunrise paint the Australian countryside in hues of gold and pink. After 20 years of waking to city sirens in Chicago, the chorus of kookaburras and cockatoos still struck him as something from a nature documentary rather than his actual life. "Best decision we ever made, wasn't it, girl?" he said, reaching down to scratch behind Bella's ears. The border collie leaned into his touch, her tail thumping against the wooden boards. At 45, Marcus had thought his firefighting days were behind him. Retiring early after a building collapse had left him with a titanium rod in his leg and nightmares that still woke him most nights. He'd intended to write the memoir his colleagues had always encouraged. From South Side to Smoke Jumper had been the working title. Instead, 6 months ago, he'd answered an international call for experienced firefighters to help with Australia's increasingly catastrophic bushfire season, bringing Bella, his certified search and rescue dog, along for what was supposed to be a temporary assignment. The rolling hills of Victoria had captured something in his soul. The wide-open spaces helped quiet the claustrophobic memories of collapsed buildings and smoke-filled corridors. He'd applied for permanent residency and accepted a position with the local fire service, much to the delight of the understaffed rural brigade. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was Sarah Mitchell from the Wildlife Sanctuary. "Still on for today? New Joey needs socializing." Marcus smiled. Sarah had been the first person to make him feel welcome in Warrigal. A wildlife conservationist with an uncompromising dedication to the native animals, especially koalas. She'd initially mistaken Marcus and Bella for poachers when she spotted them walking near a protected habitat. The shouting match that followed had somehow turned into lunch, and then weekly volunteer sessions at the sanctuary. "What do you think, Bella? Ready to make some furry friends?" The dog's ears perked up at the excitement in his voice, and she darted to the door, tail wagging frantically. Marcus pulled on his boots and grabbed his keys. The Wildlife Sanctuary was a 20-minute drive through rolling farmland and patches of native forest that had, so far, been spared from the bushfires ravaging other parts of the state. As he drove, the local radio station interrupted the classic rock program Marcus had been humming along to Creedence Clearwater Revival's "Bad Moon Rising," one of his father's favorites. "Emergency fire warning for residents of Warrigal and surrounding areas." The announcer's voice was calm but urgent. "A fast-moving bushfire has been reported near Wilson's Ridge, approximately 15 kilometers east of town. Current weather conditions are causing unpredictable fire behavior. While there is no immediate threat to properties, residents are advised to enact their bushfire plans and remain vigilant. Stay tuned for updates." Marcus frowned, glancing at the horizon. The sky had been clear blue when he'd left home, but now he could see a smudge of gray-brown in the distance. His phone buzzed again, the station captain this time. "All hands needed. Wilson's Ridge fire gaining ground. How fast can you get to the station?" Marcus sighed, looking at Bella in the passenger seat. "Rain check on the koalas, girl. Duty calls." He sent a quick text to Sarah explaining the situation, then made a U-turn heading for the fire station. By the time he arrived, the parking lot was filled with volunteers' vehicles, and the atmosphere inside was one of focused tension he recognized from countless similar situations back in Chicago. Captain Williams, a weathered man in his 60s with sun-damaged skin that spoke of decades fighting fires under the harsh Australian sun, was briefing the assembled team. "G'day, Johnson," Williams nodded as Marcus entered. "Glad you could join us. Bring your four-legged partner. We might need her." "She's in the car," Marcus confirmed, joining the circle around the large map spread on the table. "Right, listen up," Williams continued. "Fire started about 2 hours ago near Wilson's Ridge. Farm equipment spark, most likely. Normally wouldn't be a major concern, but with the drought conditions and today's wind." He drew a thick red line across the map. "Fire's moving southeast at approximately 5 kilometers per hour. We've got 3 teams from Melbourne coming, but they're at least an hour out." Jack Thompson, a tall, rangy veteran firefighter who'd taken Marcus under his wing, pointed to an area near the ridge. "What about the Fitzgerald property? That old man refuses to evacuate, no matter what." Williams nodded grimly. "Police are trying to convince him now. Johnson, you and Thompson take Tanker 3. Your priority is establishing a fire break along Kangaroo Creek to protect the eastern approach to town. Davidson and Patel, you're on Tanker 2, supporting from the north. The rest of you prepare for structure protection if this thing gets closer to residential areas." As the briefing concluded, Marcus's phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. "Be careful. That fire's near my dad's old property. He's confused today and talking about saving his koalas. Headed there now to check." Marcus frowned at the message. Sarah's father, Tom Mitchell, had been a respected park ranger before early-onset dementia had forced his retirement. He now lived with Sarah in town, but his good and bad days were unpredictable. "Everything all right?" Jack asked, noting Marcus's expression. "Maybe not," Marcus showed him the message. "Sarah's dead might be out there and she's going after him." Jack whistled low. "That's right in the path of the fire. Better tell the captain." Williams cursed when they informed him. "Police have their hands full with evacuations. Can't spare anyone for a search." "I've got Bella," Marcus offered. "If Sarah's dad is out there, we can find him." Williams considered for a moment, then nodded. "All right, slight change of plan. Johnson, you take the UTV with your dog. Find Mitchell if he's out there, but your primary mission is still that fire break. Thompson will meet you there with the tanker. And Johnson," his expression grew stern, "no heroics. If the situation deteriorates, you pull out. Clear. Crystal, sir." Within 20 minutes, Marcus was guiding the utility terrain vehicle down a rough track toward Wilson's Ridge, with Bella secured in the passenger seat. The smoke was clearly visible now, a towering column that blotted out the sun in the eastern sky. The smell of burning eucalyptus filled the air, a scent Marcus had come to associate with Australia's most devastating natural disaster. His radio crackled. "Johnson, be advised we're getting reports of spot fires jumping ahead of the main front. Wind's picking up." "Copy that," Marcus responded, pushing the UTV a little faster. He reached the old Mitchell property, a small cabin surrounded by dense bushland, just as Sarah was emerging from the building, her face tight with worry. "Marcus," she ran to the UTV. "Thank God Dad's not here, but his truck is gone. He must have headed up to the ridge. He keeps talking about his koalas that need protecting." "His koalas?" Marcus questioned, helping Sarah into the vehicle. "Dad discovered a small colony of koalas in a grove about 2 kilometers up the ridge years ago. It was unusual to find them this far south, and he became obsessed with protecting them. He'd go up there 3 times a week before he got sick. I thought he'd forgotten about them, but—" She gestured helplessly. Marcus glanced at the smoke, now visibly closer. "We'll find him. Bella can track him if we have something with his scent." Sarah hurried back to the cabin and returned with an old flannel shirt. Bella sniffed it enthusiastically, then looked expectantly at Marcus. "Find him, Bella. Find Tom," Marcus commanded. The border collie immediately put her nose to the ground, then headed toward a narrow trail leading into the bush. "That's the path to the grove," Sarah confirmed, climbing back into the UTV. They followed Bella up the trail, the UTV bouncing over roots and rocks. The smoke grew thicker, and ash began to fall like dirty snow around them. "How far to this grove?" Marcus asked, his experienced eye noting the increasing wind speed with concern. "About 15 minutes on foot normally," Sarah replied, clutching the seat as they hit a particularly rough patch. "There's a small clearing with a water tank Dad installed. The koalas congregate in the trees around it." Marcus nodded, mentally calculating. They'd find Tom, get him into the UTV, and head back down to safety. Quick in-and-out operation. Standard procedure. 5 minutes later, they rounded a bend in the trail and spotted an old pickup truck parked haphazardly across the path. "That's Dad's truck," Sarah exclaimed, jumping out before Marcus had fully stopped. Bella barked and continued up the path, nose to the ground. "Tom, Dad!" Sarah called out, her voice nearly lost in the growing roar of the approaching fire. A figure emerged from the smoke ahead, an elderly man carrying what looked like a large burlap sack. "Sarah!" Tom Mitchell squinted at his daughter. "What are you doing here? You need to leave, the fire's coming." "Dad, we're here to get you out." Sarah grabbed his arm. "It's not safe." Tom pulled away, surprisingly strong for his age. "Can't leave yet, there's 3 more up in the tall gum tree, already got 2 in the sack, but the mother won't come down with her Joey." Marcus approached carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Marcus Johnson from the fire brigade. We really need to get you to safety, sir." Tom looked at him, confusion briefly clouding his features before his eyes cleared. "You the American? Sarah mentioned you." His gaze fell on Bella. "That your rescue dog?" "Yes, sir, and right now we're here to rescue you." Tom shook his head stubbornly. "Not without my koalas. Been protecting them for 20 years, not abandoning them now." A distant crack of a falling tree punctuated his words, followed by the sound that all firefighters dreaded, the distinctive roar of a fire front gaining momentum. Marcus's radio squawked. "Johnson, fire's jumped the containment line. It's heading straight for your position. Get out now." Marcus made a split-second decision. "Mr. Mitchell, show me these koalas. Quick, we'll help you, but then we all leave. Deal?" The old man nodded, relieved. "This way, not far." They followed Tom through increasingly thick smoke to a small clearing. In the center stood a large water tank, and surrounding it were several tall eucalyptus trees. Tom pointed to the tallest. "There, see them?" Marcus squinted through the smoke. About 20 feet up, clinging to the trunk, were a mother koala and a tiny Joey. They looked terrified, their normally sleepy expressions replaced with wide-eyed panic. "Got a plan for getting them down?" Marcus asked, eyeing the distance to the ground. "Usually use a long pole with a basket," Tom explained. "But left it at home, was going to climb up." Sarah gasped. "Dad, you can't climb that, you'd fall." Another crack, much closer this time. Marcus looked back the way they'd come and saw something that turned his blood cold. The undergrowth was beginning to smolder. They had minutes at most. "New plan," Marcus decided. "Sarah, get your dad and the koalas he's already rescued back to the UTV. Start heading down. I'll get these last ones and follow you." "I'm not leaving you here," Sarah protested. "Not a debate," Marcus said firmly, already removing his fire jacket. "Bella stays with me. She's trained for this. Go now." Reluctantly, Sarah guided her father back toward the UTV, taking the burlap sack with the rescued koalas. Marcus turned to Bella. "Find a way up, girl. Show me." The border collie circled the tree, then barked at a lower branch about 8 feet off the ground. It wasn't ideal, but it was their only option. Marcus took a running start, jumped, and managed to grab the branch. Pulling himself up with a grunt of effort, his leg with the titanium rod protesting sharply, he began to climb. The smoke was getting thicker, making his eyes water and his lungs burn despite his training. "Come on, little guys," he called softly as he approached the koalas. "I'm here to help." The mother koala hissed, baring surprisingly sharp teeth. Marcus had learned from Sarah that despite their cuddly appearance, koalas could be quite aggressive when frightened. I know," he soothed. "Not what you were expecting, but we've got to move." Below, Bella barked urgently. Marcus glanced down and saw what had alarmed her. The fire had reached the clearing. The dry grass was igniting in patches, and the heat was intensifying rapidly. With no time for gentle persuasion, Marcus removed his shirt, quickly fashioning it into a makeshift sack. In one swift movement, he scooped up both koalas, enduring a painful scratch across his arm in the process. The mother koala squirmed, but then seemed to realize the greater danger and clutched her Joey tightly. Marcus secured the makeshift sack to his belt and began his descent, moving as quickly as safety allowed. The smoke was now so thick he could barely see the ground. "Bella, bark!" he commanded, needing the sound to guide him. He followed her barking, nearly falling the last few feet as a wave of dizziness hit him, smoke inhalation beginning to take effect. He stumbled toward the UTV's last position, but to his horror it wasn't there. "Sarah," he called out, coughing. No answer. She must have already headed down with her father, exactly as he'd told her to do. The rational part of his brain approved, but now he was on foot in rapidly deteriorating conditions. "Bella, find the way out," he ordered, knowing the dog's senses were sharper than his. Bella hesitated, whining. The trail they'd used to come up was now blocked by flames. Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Johnson, report status." "Cut off," he replied tersely. "Fire's between me and the exit route. I've got the dog and 2 koalas looking for alternate path down." Roger that, Thompson's approaching from the west fire break. Try to head that way. West. Marcus oriented himself using the position of the now obscured sun. This way, Bella. They moved as quickly as possible through the underbrush, the heat growing more intense with each passing minute. The koalas in his makeshift sack had gone quiet, whether from shock or smoke, Marcus couldn't tell. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, they emerged onto a wider trail, one of the fire breaks being established by the other teams. But to Marcus's dismay, the fire had jumped this line too. Flames danced across the path 30 feet ahead. His radio crackled again. "Johnson, where are you?" "On the western fire break," he gasped, the smoke making speech difficult. "But it's compromised. Fire's crossed the line." A moment of static, then. "There's another trail about 50 meters south of your position. Might still be clear. It's your only shot." "Copy that, heading south." But as Marcus turned to find this new escape route, a massive cracking sound split the air. A burning eucalyptus, its trunk weakened by the fire, was toppling directly toward them. "Bella, run!" Marcus shouted, diving forward. The tree crashed down behind them, sending up a shower of embers and effectively cutting off their retreat. And this is where we found them at the beginning of our story, trapped between advancing fire and a burning blockade, with precious lives depending on his next decision. The roar of the fire was deafening. Marcus couldn't see more than 3 feet ahead through the thick, choking smoke that turned the afternoon into an apocalyptic nightmare. His protective gear was smeared with ash and soot, the reflective strips barely visible in the hellish orange glow that surrounded them. "Bella, find them! Find them, girl!" Marcus shouted to the black and white border collie who darted ahead, her specialized protective suit making her look like a small astronaut exploring a burning planet. The dog stopped, barked twice, and pawed at the base of a towering eucalyptus that was moments away from being engulfed. Marcus's radio crackled. "Johnson, get out now. The wind's shifted. You've got less than 5 minutes before you're cut off." Sweat poured down his face inside his mask as he spotted what Bella had found, a mother koala clutching a tiny joey, frozen with terror 20 feet up. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw the same primal fear he'd recognized in countless human victims over his 15 years as a firefighter. "Not leaving them," Marcus growled into his radio. "Found survivors." "Negative, Johnson, that's a direct order. The fire break didn't hold, it's coming too fast." Just then, a massive branch crashed down mere feet away, sending up a fountain of embers that swirled around them like fiery snowflakes. Bella yelped, backing away from the intense heat. Marcus looked up at the koalas, then at the approaching wall of flame that painted the smoke blood-red. He had seconds to decide. "God help me," he whispered, unstrapping his emergency harness. "Now back to where we started, exact coordinates," the radio crackled. 1 kilometer west-northwest of your last reported position. We've established a defensive line at Kangaroo Creek." "Roger that," Marcus replied, checking his emergency GPS. "Moving to your position now." He secured the koalas in his makeshift sack, ensuring they could breathe despite the smoke. "Bella, west-northwest. Find Jack." The dog hesitated, nose working overtime through the smoke, then barked and turned decisively away from the fallen tree and the advancing fire front. She'd found a narrow gap, not a trail, barely a game path. Marcus followed, hunched low beneath the smoke, one hand holding his shirt sack with the koalas, the other occasionally reaching out to steady himself against tree trunks. The heat was becoming unbearable, sweat pouring down his face and stinging his eyes. His lungs burned with each breath despite his training. They'd covered perhaps 300 meters when Bella suddenly stopped, growling. "What is it, girl?" Marcus wheezed, then saw what had alarmed her. Ahead, a small clearing was already alight, flames dancing across the dry grass. "Around," he commanded, but Bella whined, turning in circles. The fire had moved faster than expected, cutting off their route. Marcus's training kicked in. Fire spreads fastest uphill, and with the wind, they needed to find lower ground, ideally near water. "Bella, find water," he ordered. It was a long shot. The drought had dried up many creeks, but their best hope. To his amazement, the border collie's ears perked up. She barked once, then darted off to their left, downslope. Marcus followed, stumbling over roots and rocks, the precious cargo clutched to his chest. 5 agonizing minutes later, they burst through a stand of blackened bushes, and there, miraculously, was a ribbon of muddy water, the nearly dry bed of Kangaroo Creek. And on the far bank, the welcome sight of Tanker 3 and Jack Thompson directing a defensive spray of water to hold back the approaching flames. "Jack!" Marcus shouted, his voice raw. Thompson turned, eyes widening at the sight of Marcus emerging from the smoke like a specter. "Johnson, Christ, man!" "Got koalas." Marcus managed, holding up his makeshift sack. "Need oxygen?" Thompson barked orders, and two other firefighters splashed across the shallow creek to help. One took the koalas while another supported Marcus, who suddenly found his legs wouldn't hold him. Bella pressed against his side, whining softly. "You look like hell," Thompson said, helping him to the tanker where an emergency medical kit waited. "Thought we'd lost you." "Almost did," Marcus coughed, accepting the oxygen mask gratefully. After a few precious breaths, he asked, "Sarah, her dad?" "Safe. They made it down before the main front hit. She's worried sick about you." Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. He turned to check on the koalas and saw them being carefully placed in a proper animal carrier that must have come from one of the wildlife rescue teams that often deployed during bushfires. "They okay?" he rasped. The wildlife volunteer, a young woman in a smoke-stained uniform, gave him a thumbs up. "They'll need treatment for smoke inhalation, but they should make it. That was incredibly brave." Marcus shook his head. "Just doing my job." He reached for Bella, who was receiving her own checkup from one of the firefighters. "Good girl, best partner ever." As his breathing eased, Marcus became aware of the larger situation around them. The fire fight was in full swing, with multiple tankers and teams working to establish a defensible line along the creek. The air was filled with the sounds of pumps, shouted commands, and the omnipresent roar of the fire, which had been slowed but not stopped by their efforts. "What's the status?" he asked Thompson, struggling to his feet despite protests from both his friend and his aching body. Thompson pushed him gently back down. "Fire's still advancing on 3 fronts. We're holding it here for now, but the eastern flank is threatening the outer properties of Warrigal. Air support's been deployed, but with these winds." He shrugged, the gesture conveying volumes about the unpredictability of bushfires. "I need to get back out there," Marcus insisted. "Like hell you do," Thompson retorted. "You've inhaled enough smoke to cure a side of bacon. You're going to the hospital along with your furry friends there." As if on cue, an ambulance and a wildlife rescue van pulled up to their position. Sarah jumped out of the van and ran toward them, her face streaked with tears and soot. "Marcus!" she cried, embracing him so hard it hurt his smoke-irritated lungs. "You idiot, you wonderful, stupid idiot." Marcus managed a weak laugh. "Nice to see you too." Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Dad's okay. They're checking him at the hospital, but he's more worried about his koalas than himself." She glanced at the carrier. "You actually did it. You saved them." "Bella did most of the work," Marcus deflected, patting the dog who was looking decidedly pleased with herself despite her singed fur. Paramedics approached, and despite his protests, Marcus was loaded onto a stretcher. His leg with the titanium rod had seized up completely, and the scratch from the mother koala was deeper than he'd realized. "The koalas ride with me," he insisted as they prepared to transfer him to the ambulance. The paramedic exchanged glances with the wildlife volunteer, who nodded. "We're headed to the same place. Regional Hospital has set up a triage center for wildlife casualties too." As they loaded him in, Marcus caught Thompson's eye. "Keep it contained, Jack. Don't let it reach town." The veteran firefighter gave him a mock salute. "Yes, sir. Now get out of my fire ground, you glory hound." The drive to Warrigal Regional Hospital was a blur of pain and fatigue as the adrenaline that had kept Marcus going finally ebbed away. Sarah rode with him, holding his hand while simultaneously checking on the koalas and making phone calls to coordinate wildlife rescue efforts. "You've started something," she told him as they neared the hospital. "News crews got footage of you emerging from the smoke with the koalas. It's already going viral." Marcus groaned. "Just what I need. Fame." Sarah squeezed his hand. "It's important, Marcus. People need to see what these fires really mean, not just statistics, but real animals, real people putting everything on the line." At the hospital, Marcus was whisked away for treatment while the koalas were taken to the makeshift wildlife triage center that had been established in a conference room. Bella, after a thorough examination by a veterinarian, was declared amazingly unharmed and allowed to stay with Sarah. Hours later, treated for smoke inhalation, dehydration, and the koala scratch, which required 10 stitches, Marcus was resting in a hospital bed when Captain Williams arrived. "You're either the bravest or the stupidest firefighter I've ever commanded," Williams said without preamble. "Probably both." "How's the fire?" Marcus asked immediately. "Contained for now. Change in wind direction helped. Thompson's team held the line at the creek until the air support arrived." Williams pulled up a chair. "But that's not why I'm here. Got some news you should hear from me first." Marcus tensed, preparing for the worst. In his experience, that tone from a superior usually preceded disciplinary action. "The ABC News crew interviewed Tom Mitchell about his koala sanctuary project. Turns out, those weren't just any koalas you saved." They're part of a genetically distinct population that scientists have been studying for years. Mitchell had been working with researchers from Melbourne University before his health declined, documenting their unique adaptations to climate change. Marcus blinked in surprise. He never mentioned that. Probably didn't remember the details given his condition, but the researchers do. Those koalas represent possibly the most climate-resilient population in Victoria, could be crucial for conservation efforts as these fires get worse in coming years. The captain's phone buzzed. He checked it, then showed the screen to Marcus. It was a news alert with a photo of Marcus, oxygen mask on his face, clutching the makeshift koala sack with Bella at his side. The headline read, "Hero Firefighter and Rescue Dog Save Rare Koalas from Inferno." "You're famous, Johnson," Williams said with a wry smile. "Minister for Environment is already asking for a photo op when you're recovered." Marcus groaned again. "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, your job has suddenly made our chronically underfunded fire service very visible to the powers that be. Might actually get those equipment upgrades we've been requesting for years." Williams stood. "Rest up. You've earned it. But when you're back on duty, we're going to have a serious talk about following direct orders." After the captain left, Sarah returned with Bella, who immediately jumped onto the bed despite hospital regulations, covering Marcus's face with enthusiastic licks. "How are the koalas?" Marcus asked once he'd fended off the worst of Bella's affection. "Stable. The mother and Joey you saved from the tree are doing well. The Joey wasn't even singed. The two Dad rescued have some minor burns, but the vet is optimistic." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "They're calling them the Mitchell colony now. Dad's over the moon. It's the most lucid I've seen him in months." "Your dad saved those koalas long before I did," Marcus pointed out. 20 years of protection is the real heroism." Sarah nodded, her eyes welling up. "That's what I've been trying to tell the reporters, but they all want to talk to the American firefighter who risked his life." She took his hand. "Not that you don't deserve recognition. What you did was incredible, Marcus. Couldn't leave them behind," he said simply. "Same as I wouldn't leave a person." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just passing through. Another foreigner here for the experience, then gone when things got tough." Marcus smiled ruefully. "Been running from tough most of my life. Figured I'd finally found a place quiet enough to stop." He gestured toward the window where the faint smell of smoke still lingered. "So much for that plan." "Maybe you weren't running from," Sarah suggested quietly. "Maybe you were running to something that mattered enough to risk everything for." Before Marcus could respond, there was a commotion at the door. A nurse entered, followed by a doctor, and to Marcus's surprise, Dr. Lisa Wung, the veterinarian who ran the wildlife sanctuary where he and Sarah volunteered. "Mr. Johnson," the doctor began, "how are you feeling?" "Like I inhaled a barbecue," Marcus replied honestly. "But better. When can I get out of here?" The doctor consulted his chart. "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation, but you should be able to leave tomorrow if your oxygen levels remain stable." Dr. Wung stepped forward, smiling. "I have someone who might speed your recovery." She was carrying a small pet carrier, which she placed carefully on the bedside table. Opening it, she gently lifted out the tiny koala Joey that Marcus had rescued. "This little one is doing remarkably well," she explained. "We thought a brief reunion might be beneficial for both of you. Stress can be as dangerous as physical injuries for koalas, and this Joey seems calmer when she smells your scent." Marcus stared in wonder as the tiny marsupial was placed in his hands. It couldn't have weighed more than a pound, its fur soft and still smelling faintly of smoke. The Joey looked up at him with large, dark eyes, then yawned, showing a pink tongue, and snuggled against his chest. Something broke open inside Marcus then, a dam of emotion he'd held back through the fire, the rescue, the medical treatment. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he cradled the tiny creature. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "You made it." "We both did." Bella inched closer, sniffing curiously but remaining gentle. The Joey regarded the dog with sleepy interest before closing its eyes. "She'll need round-the-clock care for a while," Dr. Wung explained. "But she's a fighter." "What about her mother?" Marcus asked. "Recovering well. We'll reunite them as soon as the mother's breathing improves." The nurse cleared her throat pointedly. "This is highly irregular. Animals aren't permitted in patient rooms except for certified service animals." Dr. Wung fixed her with a professional smile. "I assure you this is a necessary part of both patients' treatment. If you'd like to discuss the medical specifics of marsupial rehabilitation and human psychological recovery from trauma." The nurse backed down, muttering about checking with her supervisor. Once she'd left, everyone in the room broke into relieved laughter, which quickly subsided when the Joey stirred. "What will happen to them?" Marcus asked. "The Mitchell colony, I mean." Sarah answered, The university researchers want to establish a protected habitat. They're already talking about using part of Dad's old property, expanding the area he maintained. They're calling it the Thomas Mitchell Koala Sanctuary. He deserves it, Marcus said sincerely. Man was protecting them before most people even knew they needed protecting. After another 15 minutes, Dr. Wang reluctantly announced it was time to take the Joey back to its specialized care environment. Marcus handed over the tiny koala with surprising reluctance. You can visit her any time at the sanctuary, Dr. Wang assured him. In fact, we could use someone with your rescue experience as a regular volunteer. These won't be the last animals affected by bushfires. Count me in, Marcus agreed without hesitation. After Dr. Wang left, the human doctor insisted Marcus get some rest. Sarah promised to return in the morning with a change of clothes, and reluctantly took Bella with her, the border collie looking back forlornly as they left. Alone in his hospital room, Marcus found himself replaying the day's events. The fires, the rescue, the revelation about the koala's importance. He'd come to Australia seeking peace, a quiet place to heal from his own traumas. Instead, he'd found himself running into the kind of danger he thought he'd left behind. Yet holding that tiny Joey, he'd felt something he hadn't experienced in years, purpose. Not just doing a job, but making a difference that would outlast him. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Jack Thompson. Fire 80% contained. New crew relieved us. TV news showing your ugly mug every 15 minutes. Rest up, hero. We need you back out here. Marcus smiled, feeling the pull of sleep. His last thought before drifting off was that maybe running into fires wasn't always about escaping. Sometimes, it was about finding exactly where you were meant to be. 3 months later, Marcus stood at the edge of the newly established Thomas Mitchell Koala Sanctuary, watching as Sarah and her father cut the ceremonial ribbon. The crowd of local residents, university researchers, government officials, and media erupted in applause. The landscape still bore the scars of the Wilson's Ridge fire, blackened tree trunks and patches of ash-gray ground. But already the miraculous regeneration of the Australian bush was evident. Bright green shoots sprouted from seemingly dead eucalyptus trunks, and the first wildflowers were beginning to color the forest floor. Bella sat attentively at Marcus's side, her specially designed, koala detection dog vest drawing admiring comments from passers-by. After their dramatic rescue, Marcus and Bella had become local celebrities, which they both found equally uncomfortable. But they'd leveraged that unwanted fame to secure funding not just for the koala sanctuary, but for an expanded wildlife rescue program integrated with the fire service. Captain Williams approached, looking unusually smart in his dress uniform. Quite the circus, he commented, gesturing toward the media scrum surrounding Tom Mitchell, who was clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight. The old man's health seemed to have improved dramatically since the fire, his sense of purpose restored by the sanctuary project. Worth it, though, Marcus replied. The research team thinks this colony could help develop breeding strategies to make koalas more resistant to habitat loss. Williams nodded. Speaking of new projects, got a call from headquarters this morning. They've approved our proposal for the specialized wildlife rescue unit. Full funding, equipment, training, the works. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Seriously, I thought that was a long shot. Amazing what a little good publicity can do, Williams said with a hint of a smile. They want you to head it up. Me, I've only been here 8 months. 7 of which you've spent rebuilding your leg strength, training Bella for koala detection, and designing specialized rescue equipment, Williams pointed out. Plus, you're the only one with big city rescue experience and wildlife handling training. You're the obvious choice. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. Their relationship had evolved naturally in the months since the fire, moving from friendship to something deeper with the easy inevitability of the seasons changing. They want Dad to give a speech, she said. He's nervous, could use a friendly face in the front row. Marcus squeezed her hand. Of course. As they made their way toward the small stage, they passed the specially designed enclosure where the rescued koalas were being kept during their transition back to the wild. Among them was the mother and Joey Marcus had saved from the burning tree. The Joey, now named Ember by popular vote in a community contest, had become the unofficial mascot of the sanctuary. Marcus paused, watching as Ember practiced climbing under her mother's watchful eye. From a helpless ball of fur weighing barely a pound, she had grown into a confident young koala, her burned paws fully healed, her smoke-damaged lungs clear. She wouldn't be here without you, Sarah said softly, following his gaze. Marcus shook his head. Without us, all of us. He looked around at the gathered community firefighters, wildlife experts, local residents, all united by the shared experience of the fire and its aftermath. That's what I've learned here. Back in Chicago, I was just a cog in a machine. Here I'm part of something, organic, something that grows. Sarah smiled, understanding. Speaking of growing things, Dr. Wung mentioned the sanctuary will need a permanent resident manager. Someone who understands both the wildlife and fire safety protocols. Dad's consulting, but he can't take it on full time. Sounds like a big job, Marcus observed. It includes accommodation, though. That old cabin on the property, they're renovating it, making it more suitable for, say, a human canine marsupial household. Marcus looked at her, surprised. Are you offering me a job or asking me to move in with you? Sarah grinned. I'm Australian, we're efficient, why not both? Before Marcus could answer, Tom Mitchell's voice came over the PA system, slightly quavery but determined. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. Before I begin, I'd like to ask Marcus Johnson and his remarkable dog Bella to join me on stage. Sarah gave him a gentle push. Go on, destiny calls. As Marcus made his way to the stage, Bella trotting proudly at his side, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. From the smoke-filled stairwells of Chicago's burning buildings to the eucalyptus forests of Victoria. From a solitary man running from his past to a person embedded in a community, planning a future. Tom Mitchell shook his hand with surprising strength as Marcus joined him at the microphone. This young man, Tom announced to the crowd, taught this old conservationist something important, something I'd forgotten in my darker days. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. He reminded me that saving one life, human, koala, or dog, isn't just about that individual. It's about all the connections that life has, all the possibilities it represents. The old man turned to Marcus. The koalas you saved that day weren't just animals. They were 20 years of research, of adaptation, of nature finding a way forward in a changing world. They were my life's work, which I'd nearly forgotten. His voice broke slightly. You didn't just save them. You saved a piece of me, too. Marcus, uncomfortable with the attention but moved by the old man's words, simply nodded. Tom seemed to understand and turned back to the audience. This sanctuary isn't just about koalas, it's about connections between humans and wildlife, between the past and the future, between fire which destroys and fire which makes way for new growth. He gestured to the recovering landscape around them. Aboriginal people who managed this land for thousands of years understood this balance. They used controlled burning to prevent the catastrophic fires we face today. We're learning slowly to blend their ancient wisdom with our modern science. As Tom continued his speech, Marcus felt Bella press against his leg, a reassuring presence as always. From the crowd, he caught Sarah's eye. She mouthed something that looked like "my hero," then made an exaggerated gagging face that had him stifling a laugh. That was the thing about Sarah, she could acknowledge his actions without feeding the hero narrative that made him so uncomfortable. She understood that what he'd done that day wasn't extraordinary to him. It was just who he was, who he'd always been. Running toward danger instead of away from it. Not because he was brave, but because he couldn't do otherwise. When the ceremony concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, including a group of children from the local primary school who had made thank-you cards for the koala rescue team. One shy little girl with tight braids reminiscent of his niece's back in Chicago handed him a drawing of a black firefighter holding a koala with a spotted dog at his side. Is it true your dog can smell koalas from a kilometer away? She asked, wide-eyed. Marcus glanced at Bella, who was basking in the attention of the children. She's pretty amazing, but I don't think even Bella can smell that far. She can find them in the trees, though, which is the important part. I want to train rescue dogs when I grow up, the girl declared, and save animals from fires. Marcus knelt to her level. That's a great dream. Maybe you can join our new wildlife rescue unit someday. Her face lit up. Really? Really? We'll need smart, dedicated people like you. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Marcus found a quiet moment with Captain Williams to discuss his new role. It's not going to be easy, Williams warned. You'll be building this unit from scratch, training, equipment, protocols, all of it, and you'll be setting a precedent for other regions. I know, Marcus acknowledged, but it's necessary. As these fires get worse, we need specialized teams that understand both fire behavior and wildlife needs. Williams studied him. You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were just passing through. Another tourist firefighter here for the experience, the exotic stories to take home. Marcus smiled, remembering Sarah's similar observation. Seems I fooled a lot of people. Including yourself? Williams asked perceptively. Before Marcus could answer, they were interrupted by a local reporter asking for just one more photo of the rescue team. Reluctantly, Marcus posed with Bella beside the sanctuary sign, trying not to squint in the bright Australian sun. When the media finally departed, Marcus found himself alone with Sarah at the edge of the sanctuary. The late afternoon light filtered through the eucalyptus leaves, creating dappled patterns on the recovering forest floor. "So," Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence, "Captain Williams mentioned he offered you the Wildlife Rescue Unit position." "He did," Marcus confirmed. And I told him I'd think about it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought it was your dream job." Marcus looked out over the landscape, the blend of fire-scarred trees and new growth that so perfectly mirrored his own journey. "It is, but there's this other opportunity. Sanctuary manager comes with a renovated cabin, I hear." Sarah tried to hide her smile. "Both jobs would keep you pretty busy." "True, but they're complementary." The rescue unit would handle emergency situations during fire season. The sanctuary work would be ongoing rehabilitation, prevention, habitat management. He turned to face her directly. "I don't see why I couldn't do both with the right partner." "Partner?" Sarah repeated, her eyes twinkling. "Professional or personal?" "Both," Marcus said simply, "if you're interested." Instead of answering immediately, Sarah knelt to ruffle Bella's fur. "What do you think, girl? Should we keep him around?" Bella barked once, tail wagging furiously. "That's settled then," Sarah stood, stepping closer to Marcus. "But there's something you should know before you commit. I'm a package deal too. Dad's going to need ongoing care, and I won't put him in a facility unless absolutely necessary." Marcus nodded seriously. "I wouldn't expect otherwise. Besides, the sanctuary needs his expertise. And," he grinned suddenly, "I'm pretty sure Bella considers him family already." As if to confirm this, Bella trotted over to where Tom Mitchell was sitting on a bench nearby, resting after the excitement of the ceremony. The old man's face lit up as the border collie placed her head on his knee, accepting his gentle scratches with closed eyes of contentment. "Look at them," Sarah said softly. "Dad was always a dog person. Never thought I'd see him bonding with a koala detection specialist, though." "Life's full of surprises," Marcus agreed, taking her hand. "3 months ago, I thought I was dying in that fire. Now I'm standing here planning a future I never imagined." "Is that a good thing?" Sarah asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Marcus looked around at the sanctuary, at Tom and Bella, at the recovering forest, and finally at Sarah, this woman who had somehow become the center of a life he was no longer running from. "The best," he said, and kissed her as the Australian sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that, for once, brought to mind not the terror of fire, but the warmth of coming home. In the renovated enclosure nearby, Ember the koala Joey climbed to a higher branch, surveying her domain with the confidence of a survivor. Above her, new leaves unfurled on branches that had been scorched bare just months before. Below, the humans who had saved her made plans for a future where such rescues might become easier, more frequent, more successful. Life, like the Australian bush, found a way to regenerate after fire. Not unchanged, the scars would always remain, but stronger, more resilient, ready to face the next challenge with hard-won wisdom. As darkness fell on the newly established Thomas Mitchell Koala Sanctuary, Marcus Johnson, no longer running, no longer alone, walked hand in hand with Sarah toward the renovated cabin that would soon become their home, Bella trotting happily ahead, occasionally looking back as if to say, "Hurry up, this is where we belong." And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that she was right. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.